All right. So congratulations for making it this far. You have effectively now brushed up on your Solidity skills or learned about Solidity for the first time, learned the fundamentals for blockchain, for DApplications, and actually built multiple smart contracts out, albeit in the IDE, right? So we already had that all set up for us in the environment. It's not the real deal. It's not going to really push us to get familiar of what it would be like to work in a professional environment under the clock, having to actually depend on a team environment, depend on dependencies. So in this section, now comes the real, this is where the fireworks begin, all right? This is where we got to put in the work. We're going to actually build everything from scratch using our own text editors. So we are not going to be using IDEs. We are going to build our own DApplication, a digital bank, from scratch, okay? So we're going to be building all the smart contracts. Well, before that, we're going to be actually bringing in the dependencies. So we're going to use something called NPM, and we're going to show you what that is. If you've never used that before, we're going to be running things on our terminal. So you're going to learn about working with your text editor for coding, working with the terminal, working with doing tests. So we're going to be doing tests of things. And it's okay if you don't know what any of these things mean yet, or you've never done these things. I'm going to treat it like you've never done it before, and we're going to build out an entire project together, and we're going to apply best practices, all right? We're going to be using React, and React essentially is one of the most popular frameworks for JavaScript. That's awesome. I love React. And what React allows us to do, it allows us to basically create much more efficient, efficiently run applications with JavaScript, and we're going to see how that works together. So we're going to be using and learning how to use one of the coolest and best applications out there in the world for building applications. So we're going to be using React, which works off of JavaScript, and JSX, which is a combination of HTML. We're going to be using Web3, which is a framework which is going to actually allow us to interact with MetaMask. We're going to learn about what MetaMask is and hooking that up to our browser. So we're going to be interacting with accounts, like real accounts on our MetaMask, okay? Well, we're not going to actually be using our actual accounts or real money because we don't want to use real money here. We're going to do everything with fake Ether on a test network, but we're still going to have to create our own test network blockchain setup, and we're going to do that with Ganache. And Ganache, I'm going to show you what that is as well. So there's a lot going on here, but by the end, what I can promise you is that if you follow me step by step, okay, through this section, by the end of this section, we are going to have an application developed that we can, where customers can come to this application, okay, and they can stake, they can deposit their tokens, deposit their money into this application, and then we can reward them for doing that into our decentralized bank. So we're going to create a yield farming application. We're going to do it with the best, most modern technologies and tools available, and I'm going to explain everything step by step to give you a taste of how this would be done in a professional environment. All right? Okay, so this is exciting. It's cool. It's fun. And there's a lot of work there, so take your time. Don't worry if the concepts are a little bit overwhelming, if you're not sure about things. If you want to go back before you start this and keep working on your Solidity, then go ahead and do that. But, you get to a point where you don't have to know everything about everything. If you have the basics down and you feel good, then I encourage you to just keep going forward. You'll forget things, and then you'll come back to them. We're going to go back to them over and over and over, and the more you do it, the better, the more it's just going to make sense, and that's just how you become better with programming in general. All right? Okay, so that's it. I'm done with the talking. We're going to start with the coding and the building, the architecture, all that awesome stuff. So I'm very excited to get started with you. Let's get going. See you in the next video. All right, so the very first dependency, the first thing that we need to get in order to make sure that everything is going to work and we're going to be able to build our application together is a wallet. We're going to need a wallet to store accounts, right? Because we're doing tons of transactions and these need to be stored somewhere. And the wallet that we're going to be using is MetaMask. All right, so if you don't have a MetaMask installed, then just follow along in this video to get your MetaMask hooked up. If you already have MetaMask hooked up and you know what it is, you can continue to the next video. Okay, so I'm assuming you don't have it if you're still watching. So what we want to do is we want to go to metamask.io. Okay, so metamask.io. And essentially MetaMask, it's a gateway to blockchain apps and a crypto wallet. And what it does is that it acts as an extension to your browser, or it hooks up to your iOS, and then you can access your account. And then you can access an Ethereum account that way. So if you don't have an account set up, you don't have a wallet, what you do is you can download MetaMask. So you go to metamask.io, you download it, and then follow the instructions, and it will install into your browser over here. So if you look at the top right corner, you see where my mouse is right now hovering? It's hovering over this fox. That fox is the same as this fox. That's MetaMask. So after you've downloaded and installed successfully, it should be very quick, right? You just put in a few pieces of information, then you will see the fox, okay? When you click on the fox, it's going to pop up and your account is going to pop up. You should only have one account because you just created it, right? So I'm on a different account over here, but you only have one account. You're also going to see that your network up here will say the Ethereum mainnet, okay? You're going to be in the Ethereum mainnet, and then you're going to see your balance, which should be 0, whether or not you're connected, which you shouldn't be connected because you're not going to be connected to anything, and then you'll have some other options here. And I'm not going to go much more deeper into MetaMask than that because it doesn't matter. That's not important. The important thing is that we're going to use the MetaMask to keep track of the wallets and to see the transactions, to sign transactions and verifications, because in the real world, this is what people are using in applications. They're using their wallet and then they're signing off when they're doing transactions. And so we're doing it the real way. We're going to be working with MetaMask. That's how we do it here. It's just how we roll. All right. So get your MetaMask up and running. When it's up and running and working, please proceed to the next video. I'll see you there. All right, so one of the prerequisites here in order for us to run tests on a test network up on the Ethereum blockchain is that we're going to be using from our Truffle suite, from the Truffle framework, Ganache, okay? And what Ganache is, well, essentially Ganache, it's a personal blockchain for rapid Ethereum and Corda distributed application development, all right? Ganache is what's going to enable us to create accounts with test ether and also have a test network that we can load up to on our MetaMask. In my MetaMask, I'm in the Ethereum mainnet, but I'm going to switch from the mainnet. If I click on mainnet, I have Ganache. I have the Ganache network, and we're going to show you how to switch that and set up the Ganache network. But effectively, this is another network on Ethereum, and this is where we can actually run development environment tests, and we don't have to use real ether, so that's good. And that's why that's why we do that, and that's why we do this like that. And if I switch to my account number 2 here, we see that I have 99 ether in account number 2. All right, so in order to install Ganache, what you want to do is go to trufflesuite.com/docs/Ganache/quickstart. Okay, so that's, if you can see, Truffle Suite, TruffleSuite.com/docs/Ganache/quickstart. All right, now you want to install Ganache for your version. So if you got Windows, you're going to have a .appx, you're going to have a DMG for Mac, app image for Linux. All right. After you've installed Ganache, open up the application. Now here, actually, let me just quit. Let me open it up like for the first time so you can see it. What you're going to see is this window over here, and it's going to say Ganache, and you're going to create a workspace, and you're going to have options for quick start or new workspace. So we're just going to go for quick start. So you click on quick start, and it's actually going to set up the Ganache network for us. So we're going to have a test network up and running that we can hook up to, and that's how and this network is where we're going to be deploying all of our smart contracts, right? And we can see that we have the server up here. So this is the server and this is the network ID. And when it's loaded, you're going to see 10 accounts. And each account is going to have 100 ETH. Okay, that's the balance. And we get to play with that. So it's very similar to the Remix IDE, right? When we had our Remix IDE and that was being hooked up. So with Ganache, it's similar like that, except for now this is our own rapid development network where we can actually deploy our contracts and build our DApplication like that. So make sure you have it installed. And then it's important to note that throughout this section, you're going to want to always have this running. So if, and this is super, super, super important. So don't forget what I'm about to say, because this is really important just in case this happens to you. If you shut down your computer, if you quit Ganache, what's going to happen is that these accounts are going to go away. You're going to reinstantiate different accounts, right? You're going to be re-hooking up this test network. And when you do that, you're going to have to run your Truffle migrations again. So just remember for now that you're going to have to run your Truffle migrations again. It's okay if you don't know what that means yet, but you are going to know very soon because we're going to be running many Truffle migrations. So for now, just remember, take a note of this, that if you quit Ganache and you load it up again, and when we're building up again, and all of a sudden you can't find the contracts, it's not working, the application isn't working, you're getting error messages and you don't understand, make sure that you migrate your Truffle contracts again, right? All right, that's the important thing to remember. So have that up and running. Now that it's up and running and you see the accounts up, awesome. Let's move on to the next step, to setting everything up we need to start developing our DApplication. All right. So now that we have Ganache up and running, we see our accounts running, we see the network ID here. This is the unique network for Ganache. And we have our MetaMask set up. If you don't, please go back to the last videos and make sure that you have both your MetaMask set up on your browser, so it pops up over here, and you have Ganache up and running. Okay. Now we want to link Ganache to our MetaMask. So it's not going to be automatically set up to our MetaMask, right? So what do I mean by that actually? Well, actually, what do I mean by that? So if I click on MetaMask, right, on the icon, and we see our account pop up, as I mentioned in the MetaMask video, we noticed that we're automatically set to this Ethereum mainnet. The Ethereum mainnet is the actual mainnet where Ether is being transacted, okay? But if we open the Ether mainnet, the Ethereum mainnet, and we click on that, we're going to get a drop down for other networks, okay? And we see Ropsten, Kavin, Rinkeby. So these are test networks. Essentially, Ganache is another test network, but it's a test network that is localized for us to use, all right? So you're not going to see Ganache, and that's fine because you haven't actually set it up. So what you want to do now is you want to set up your Ganache into MetaMask. So you do that by actually clicking on Custom RPC, all right? So when you click on, okay, so for the network name, you want to write Ganache, okay? For the RPC URL, you want to copy over the RPC URL that we see over, wait, where is it? Oh yeah, Ganache over here. So we want to copy over this number. For the URL, you want to copy over the HTTP, all right? The chain ID default, I believe, is 1337. Now, it's going to tell me that this chain ID is currently in use by a local host 8545 because I already have Ganache set up, right? But you don't, so you're going to use that. So put in the network name Ganache. It's not really currency. I don't think you need that. Or a block explorer URL, you could add that as well. But you don't need to. Effectively, this is what you need to fill out. You put the RPC URL, the network name, and the ID, and then you save it. Once you save it, you should be able to open up your networks and find Ganache, and then click on Ganache. All right, and congratulations, you have just successfully set up the Ganache network to MetaMask, which is really important because we're going to be using this wallet to see that our transactions are working. Now, the next thing that we want to do is actually import one of these accounts into our MetaMask, right? Because our MetaMask now has one default address account, right? That should be your default account. It should say account 1. All right. Let me go here. Account 1, right? But what we're going to be doing in this application is that we're going to be using this first account to be the account of the owner. All right. So the account of the owner of the contract. So that's not going to be the account that we're going to use. But this second account is going to be the account of our customer. It's going to represent the account of our customer. So that's the account that we're going to need to hook up. To our Ethereum. And it's okay if that doesn't make sense why we're doing it just yet, because we're not actually doing it. This is just advanced preparation. But if that does make a bit of sense, then that's awesome. Regardless, the point is this. The point is that we're going to use the first account as the account that deploys our smart contracts and gets the money and receives money from the bank, right? This is our bank address. And the second account is just going to represent all of our customers. So when they come in, so we're going to use that. We're going to use this actively, right? Because we're going to go into the perspective we're going to go into the perspective of the customer and constantly check to see that transactions work. So in order to grab this account, we see an index here, and this actually has our private keys. All right, and we always want to keep these hidden because it's a private keys. In this case, it doesn't really matter because it's tests, because it's just test ether. But if this was real ether, you never want to show this information. Okay. So I'm going to grab the private key code over here. I'm going to copy it, all right, from this account. From the second account. Okay. And now I'm going to go back to MetaMask. I'm going to open it up. All right. Actually, open it up, and then I'm going to import account, right? I'm going to click on the icon over here next to the Ethereum mainnet, click on import account. And then here, I'm going to paste in the private key. I'm not going to copy it one at a time because that would take forever. I'm just going to paste it in and click on import. After you do that, it should load up. You should have your new account loaded up. It should say account number 2. Mine says 3 because I had a second account. And now if I switch to Ganache, you should see that in the Ganache network, we have 100 ETH, right? Because in Ganache, this account has 100 ETH. It's 100 test ETH. Let's not get excited. It's not real. This is test ETH. But this is what we have hooked up now into our MetaMask. It's that test version, right? If we were to switch our account network from Ganache to Ethereum, we're going to see that in real ETH on the mainnet, we only have 0. We don't actually have any real money. But when we go back to the test, we have 100. Okay. So very important. Very, very, very important. Right? Very important. Last thing I'm going to tell you here. Make sure always, when we are developing our application, that you're keeping track of this, that you're keeping track of the account, that you're keeping track of Ganache, that it's open and active, and that it's hooked up correctly to the MetaMask. Because remember, the second that you quit Ganache, second you close this, you're going to have to bring in a new account. You're going to have to redo that, bring in a new account, and you're also going to have to go into the terminal and you're going to have to run Truffle migrations. And we're going to learn about what that is in the next couple of videos, and we're going to be doing a lot of that. So don't worry if you have no clue what I mean by Truffle migrations yet. We're about to get deep and into Truffle together. All right. So that's it. So just remember those things. They're very important things to remember. Can't stress it enough. And excellent work getting your MetaMask set up, getting your test network set up for the blockchain, and then hooking these things up together. All right. We are done. We are in fact done with the front end aspect of our blockchain development, of hooking up into our blockchain development. Now we can actually begin focusing on the frameworks, the dependencies, and loading everything up to get to the fun coding stuff. All right. Keep up the good work. See you in the next video. All right. So in order to set up our dependencies, we are going to have Node set up and installed onto our terminal. Now, what is Node.js? Well, Node.js is essentially, it's just a runtime environment that allows us to run JavaScript on our terminals. And I'm going to on terminals. So we can actually run JavaScript code on our terminal, and our terminal is where we generally just open stuff up, right? So if I'm on my terminal, I can cd to different directories. I can see what's available, I can say, oh, wow, there's this PNG over here, screenshot. So we're going to need Node.js and NPM as well. So NPM essentially stands for Node Package Manager, and that's an application and repository for developing and sharing JavaScript code. So we use NPM to actually get libraries and frameworks such as Truffle so that we can actually build development servers, so that we could build applications. As developers, Node.js is extremely valuable, all right? So how do we install Node.js and how do we get NPM working, all right? Well, step one, we have to install Node.js. So we got to go to nodejs.org/download or /en for English download. Maybe there's a Spanish version. And then here we're going to see that we have different versions for installation. So you can install for Windows, Mac. So click on the one that you need and follow the instructions for the installations, okay? Once you've installed it, launch it. Open the downloads link in your browser, click on the file, right? So open it up. Then the system's going to ask you if you want to run the software. You want to say run. You're going to be welcome to the Node.js wizard. Click next. Click next. The installation will prompt you for the location. Click next. Go through all the steps and install. Okay. Once you've gone through all those steps, we can verify if it was installed successfully. How do we verify it? Well, we go back to our terminal, and if it's installed, we should be able to find the version simply by running the command node and then -v for version. And there we're going to get the version. So I see my version over here. It's 10.15.3, and you're going to see your version. So go ahead and make sure that that's working. Pause the video, get to this point, all right? Make sure that everything's working and you have it. All right, so hopefully you have that nice and working. Next up, let's just look together and really understand that Node can run JavaScript. That's what it essentially does. And we can do that by launching Node in our terminal. So if we type in Node, we're actually going to get this arrow, and this means that Node is now running. So we can effectively write JavaScript now in our terminal. So let's say I want to create variables. I can say there's a constant. It's going to be a cat, all right, a string of a cat, or a constant cat, sorry, and it's going to equal blue. I'm going to have a blue cat, all right? Now when I hit enter, oh my gosh. Oh man, okay, so first of all, I don't know why I did that. There's not constant equals cat equals blue, just constant cat equals blue, right? Our variable cat equals blue. And then we hit enter. And now if we check to see what cat is, we get blue. So there you go, right? Because blue. And that makes sense, right? Because we set cat to blue. So we are effectively running JavaScript. Clear is not defined. Okay, right. I can't actually clear anything on here. Yeah. So it's important to note that when you install all the Node packages, you get NPM. So now with NPM, we're going to be able to get React. We're going to be able to get all the important and all the amazing and important technologies, frameworks, libraries we need to build out our DApplication. So congratulations if you just got Node for the first time in NPM. That's a big step. Welcome to this new world. Welcome to this brave new world of really cool things to explore. And here's an exercise if you'd like. Go ahead, open up Node, and try and write a function, and try to write a basic JavaScript function in Node that can add up two variables. Add 5 to whatever argument you add to the function. So create a function that adds 5 to a number. So whatever, if I give you 3, then we should get 8. If I give you 4, then we should get 9, etc., etc. So go ahead, give that a shot. And in the next optional video, let's explore more on Node if you're interested in learning more about Node. If not, skip on ahead and let's keep focusing on our DApp explorations together. All right, welcome back. So hopefully you had some success with the addition exercise. Let's run through it together, if not, really quickly. So what you want to do is you want to type in Node. right? Oops. Well, I'm already in it, but okay. So first you want to launch node, right? So we want to just create a function in JavaScript that can add 5 to whatever we put in. So we can write a function. We're going to call it add 5. It's going to take a value of x, all right? And what are we going to put in our function? Well, we're just going to say return x plus 5, okay? Just like that. So let's go ahead, enter that. And now, if we say add 5, and we give it an argument such as 3, we see that we get 8. If we give it an argument of 4, we see we get 9. Okay, so our JavaScript is working. So if you figured out how to do that, that's awesome. It means that you're running Node, you're running JavaScript, you looked up functions, you looked up the addition function, you figured out how to do that. That's awesome. If you gave it a shot but you had no idea how to do any of this, don't worry, we haven't even covered JavaScript. It's a totally different language. This was just an optional exercise to just challenge you into trying something that you've never done before and to have a little bit of fun with Node. Kudos to you for actually trying this out, giving it a shot, and I'll see, right? And let's keep up this good work, keep up this positive attitude, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, so before we get into installing our dependencies, I just want to talk about Truffle because Truffle is going to play a very big role in the developmental process of building our DApplication, in both the back end and in the front end. So Truffle is a development environment, testing framework, and asset pipeline for Ethereum. And it aims to make life as Ethereum developers easier, which it really does, you know? So what are some of the things that it comes with? Well, we have built-in smart contract compilation, which is what we're going to be seeing because we are going to be compiling contracts, linking, we're going to be seeing that, deploying, we're going to be deploying contracts. We also have automated contract testing with Mocha and Try. Mocha is a very popular testing framework, and we're going to be using Mocha and actually building complete test suites throughout this course. All right, so that's really important. So we also have custom build processes, scriptable deployment, migration frameworks, network management for deploying both public and private networks, which we're going to be doing, instant rebuilding, which we use as well. So Truffle essentially is the framework that we're using, and you want to run a global installation of a Truffle. And we want to run a global installation of Truffle. So in order to install Truffle globally, what you want to do is go to your terminal, and then from your terminal, here, let me just clear all this stuff here so you can see better. From your terminal, you just want to run npm install -g Truffle, okay? And the G is for global. So we want a global installation. This is going to install Truffle globally. And that's going to be great for when you're running multiple different contracts and you're keeping in your different directories, your files, and you're building different React scripts, let's say, or whatever. It's just good to run it globally. So go ahead, go into your terminal and download it globally. All right. So the next thing that we need to do is actually grab the starter kit. And the starter kit, and I know I said that we're going to be coding this from scratch, and effectively we are. The starter kit really isn't much. It's just a couple of folders, but the folders are set up architecturally. So the directories and the way that we're going to build everything is going to be done from the ground up. But I wanted to at least give an outline. And instead of just doing an outline presentation, I figured the best way to give you an outline is to actually show you how it's done. Where and how we want to put our components files, where and how we want to write our configuration files, where and how and why we want to put our contract files, our test files. All of these things really do matter. You know, it's not just throwing things around. There is a sense of architecture and design when you are on the coding side. All right. So, all right. And that's a very young and ridiculous picture of me that I need to change. So please just ignore this picture. I got to update that. Wow. All right. So to grab the staking app starter kit, the DeFi staking app starter kit, which is essentially the name of the dApp that we're going to be making, what you want to do is actually grab it from GitHub. Now you could actually now without getting into too much of what GitHub is. Essentially, GitHub is just a place for repositories for code. So you can put up your code, and then you can share open source code. You can build code. It's really great for teamwork, for development, for open source projects, and it's great for you. And it also works for our project, and also works for you working on our project because you can just grab it from my repository. So in order to grab my project from my GitHub repository, what you can do is you can just go to your terminal and make sure that you're in the desktop, or make sure that you're somewhere in the terminal where you're in some directory where you know this file is going to be. So maybe you've got a special directory for that, like projects, or like projects, learning projects, DApplication projects, coding projects, something like that, right? So go into that file folder, that directory. I'm going to put it in the desktop, and then what you want to do is clone my project. And by cloning the project, all that really means is you're going to copy the project and download it. So there's two ways to actually grab my code. There's two ways to actually grab the code. The first way is that you want to go to github.com/01Clarian. All right, so that's me, and that's going to pull up my portfolio, whether or not you have an account. All right. From there, you're going to click on repositories. When you click on repositories, the first repository you're going to see is called DeFi Staking App Starter, unless I've made a couple more by now. In that case, just scroll down till you find it, or you can just search for it in the text. All right. When you find DeFi Staking App Starter, you click on that, and then it's as easy as just clicking on this green button, code. If you do that, you can download it as a zip, all right, or you can clone it. Now, to clone the repository, what you need to do is you just copy this HTTPS, all right? So we copy the HTTPS, then we go back to our terminal. From the terminal, we write git clone, and then put in the repository. And remember that we want to add this to somewhere. And remember that we want to add this to a directory somewhere in our terminal where we can access this, where it makes sense. So you want to put it either in a folder where you're doing projects, you're building code, or whatever it is. That's where you want to be. That's where you want to place this. All right. So I'm going to hit git clone and return. Okay. So now git clone essentially is going to just download and install everything for us. After doing that, what we want to do is cd into DeFi staking app. Okay. And now let's hit list to make sure that we're in it. And when we do, we actually see that there's another file, DeFi Staking App Starter, and we want to go into this file. So we want to cd again into DeFi Staking App Starter, and then from there, we are actually in the project, and this is the source of the project. This is where our index is, and we're going to see later on what I mean by that. But essentially, this is where we render all of our front end, and we run our Truffle testing, our back end, and our hooking up to the blockchain. So we want to keep it inside the DeFi Staking App Starter in the DeFi Staking App Starter. All right, so we want to be in here in the terminal. So even if you download it as a zip file, you want to make sure that then you go in your terminal into the folder. Okay. Now from here we want to open up all our files in our text editor, and I can do this simply by typing code period. The period is for all, and code. And when I do that, it opens up our entire package. In our text editor, we should see our, basically, you should see the DeFi staking app in your directory tab on the left-hand side. So if you click on the arrow, you should be able to, even if you're not using the same text editor that I am, should be a similar outline where you can kind of travel through your different directories. And we're going to go through what all these files are. And before we do that, I just want us to add a couple extra files to this project, because these are going to be the foundation files, or sorry, not files, folders. We're going to add a couple of folders, and these are going to be the foundation folders for as we build and develop our projects. Right now, we really don't have anything. All we have currently in our project, and we're going to see this in the next video, we're going to go much more into detail, but if you open up the src folder directory, you'll see that we have some pictures. We have a service worker.js, which you don't have to worry about. we have the index.js file. And that, by the way, JS, that's JavaScript. We're going to go into all of that later. Well, not later on, coming up quite soon. But if you click on the index.js, you're going to see that we import React from React. And we're going to talk about what this means as we learn about React and we use React together. We see that we have Bootstrap. And Bootstrap is actually going to be what we use to style our project. And by importing it in this index.js file, we actually have access to Bootstrap globally throughout our entire project. And we're going to see what that means, so don't worry if I'm getting a little bit ahead. So for now, let's just create a couple more folders together, and I promise it's not that complicated. What we want to do is, if you right-click on the source folder directory, you should be able to create a new folder. You should have access to that. Now, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to actually go into the folder directory itself and just add some folders. So we want to add 2 folders in the source directory, right? So we want to have 2 folders here. The first one we want should be called contracts, and it's lowercase, and yes, camel case, lowercase, this is all going to matter as we code. Okay, so one called contracts, and we're going to create another folder also in the source directory, not in the contracts directory, and it's going to be called components. And we're going to talk about what these 2 folders are in the next video. Okay, so let's just make those 2 for now, and then we're going to have one more folder in the same main directory, so in the DeFi staking app starter directory, where we will find our source folder, where we can find our public folder, and this is going to be called migrations. Okay. All right, so now what you should see is migrations, public, source, a package.json, a package lock JSON, and then you can open up the migrations folder. There'll be nothing inside. Public will have an icon, index, manifest JSON, and source will have our components folder, our contracts folder, our images, an index file, and a service worker. Okay, awesome. So again, no worries if you're not sure what all this means. We're just setting up the architecture. In the next video, we're going to go through what all of this means, and then we're going to start building. So great stuff. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do here is actually go into our directory where our code is, and we can just do that in our console by cding into DeFi-staking-app. Now, once we're in the actual folder, we can actually launch it up in our text editors by typing in the name of our text editor, or whatever the shortcut for that would be, followed by a period, followed by a period, so the period will open up the entire, all of the code specifically to that. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. So for that, all I have to do really is type in code, space, and then period. Now, if you have Sublime, for example, or depending what it is, you can just go to the website. And Sublime is another text editor that's very popular, but you could just go to their website and try to look to see what the shortcut commands could be for console or for loading it up through your console like that. So I'll hit enter, and here we go. So now we see we actually have our I have my Visual Studio Code open, and you'll have whatever text editing coding software that you use opened as well, hopefully. And let me just make sure. Okay, and so once we open it up, we're not going to see that much to start, right? So we can take a look on the left side and we can see everything that we have. And you're going to also want to make sure that you have Solidity as an extension so that it can be recognized, because we are going to be writing Solidity files, of course. So to do that, we have to go into our extensions, and then we have to search for the extension and then install the extension. So if you search for Solidity and you don't see it, then you want to add it, and we want to add it. So you want to add the Solidity, Ethereum Solidity language. Okay, and now this is on the left side here where my mouse is, essentially in Visual Studio Code is where we can see our entire file directory and the makeup. So we've opened up our file and we're going to see that there's not much to start with, but don't worry, we are going to be building these smart contracts out together along with the front end and the configuration for the back end with Truffle. Okay, so but what you should see from the file is you should see an empty migration folder. We should see our React public folder, which includes the index HTML. And then we should see our source folder. And in our source folder, we're going to have another empty folder components, an empty folder contracts, and then some images. So we've got our digital bank image, and then our source folder, and then we see we have our components, and we see we have a components folder, and then we have a contracts folder underneath that. And then we have some images, some PNGs that we're going to be using. So we have our digital bank PNG, we have our Ethereum logo, we have another logo. Oh, sorry, that was a little bit small, but here we can zoom in. All right, maybe not the greatest resolution, but you get the idea. And of course, we have our tether PNG as well over here, because we are, of course, going to be using a mock tether. Since we're going to be using mock tether for our staking together, tether together. All right. And we have a token logo as well. Now, actually, the first thing I like to do, especially if you're doing full stack development or you're building a project serverless and you're really building the front end and the back end yourself or with a small team, is to really conceptualize from the get-go, not just the stack that you're going to use and the conceptualizations of the ideas, but the architecture. And a very basic way to do this, this may seem simple enough, this may seem a little bit deceivingly simple, but really it's important to have these folders laid out. So let's just talk about this for a second and think about the architecture for our code, how we want to be compartmentalizing our code out, where we're placing the different forms of logic, the different forms of logic, because remember, this is a bit more multi-complex than just building a serverless application, right? Because we are leveraging blockchain. So we have to think about, where do we want to keep our business logic? Where do we want to keep our component logic? Where do we want to keep our state for React? And all these things, of course, if you're unfamiliar with these terms, we are going to be going through them again together and trying to really lay this out. So don't worry if you're not so sure when we talk about state. So our migrations folder is going to be where we will be building it's where we're going to be deploying our contracts. It's essentially building the logic in order to deploy our contracts. Now, why is it called migrations? Well, it's important when we're running a test development environment to have a migrations folder set up so that we can actually update our blockchain environment status. So we have to bear in mind that when it comes to blockchain, when we put something up, like when we're actually putting it up on the main net, whenever our smart contracts go up, it's done. It's up there on the blockchain, and that transaction is completed. The smart contract is up there. We can't actually go into that smart contract itself and start changing things on the Ethereum blockchain. Okay, but what we can do, so does that mean, therefore, that we can never make changes to our smart contracts? Well, in some sense, yes, but in another sense, no. That's why we can leverage migrations, because you can actually look at the blockchain and think of it in terms of transactions that are changing. Therefore, the state of the blockchain is changing in itself. So that's why we consider creating these migrations, so that as we run our tests, we need to constantly be developing our smart contract, right? Like, we're adding functions, we're changing functionality to it, we're changing the logic, we're building the logic out. We don't know exactly how things are going to turn out or exactly where we're evolving from the get-go. So that's why we have a system set up so that we can migrate. And what we do when we migrate, essentially, is we update the status, where we create new addresses for our newly updated or our updated and developed contracts, smart contracts, and then we send our transactions, and then we set our application to those new addresses. That's effectively what we are doing. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, don't worry, because we're going to see this together as we develop our yield farming application together, because we're using multiple smart contracts, and we're going to see not only how they work by themselves, but how they actually integrate with each other as well. So to recap, our migrations folder is where we will be storing the code to deploy and update our smart contracts. Now in our source folder, we have our components, and this is a very standard React system setup where you want to have a folder for your components. Now, what are your components? Your components are essentially the different functional aspects of your application. So a nav bar, for example, we're going to be building out a nav bar, something as basic as that, a form, that does something, the timer for our airdrop. These are all components, and how we want to compartmentalize our components and build them out is really important to think about too, because it helps us to be organized, and it helps us for working in team environments as well, so that when there are issues with our code or updates, it's easy to kind of move from one point to another thing, and we don't get these massive, long, confusing JavaScript files of code, but instead we have these nicely written out components which we can then also use multiple times over and over, and that becomes very powerful too, right? Because if we have a timer, for example, if we build an amazing timer component for our airdrop, then that component is done, that logic is done, and we can reuse that, for multiple different things, which is really powerful when it comes to more advanced JavaScript. Okay, so the components are where we're going to be building out the functionality for our applications. And then the contracts file under here is where we're going to be building our smart contracts. So we're going to be creating a smart contract for our tether, for our USDT. That tether, of course, doesn't exist right now. So we need to set how many tokens it contains, the supply. We need to set up the functionality. So, we have to remember that. So it's important that we want our users and our customers to be able to approve their transactions. So we have a measure of security. So we put all that kind of functionality in there. The transferring of funds, the transferring of tokens, that's going to go into our contracts, as well as our yield farming contract, which we're going to be building out together as well. Okay, so our contracts go in our contracts. So our contracts go in our contracts file, and that makes a lot of sense. We have our images, which we will leverage when we're building out our front end. And then we have our git ignore, which is for when we put stuff up on GitHub, and we can just ignore that for now. We have our Babel. Okay, but let's take a look at our package JSON together. So when we open up the package JSON file, we see that we have basically our dependencies, and let's go over the dependencies together. We understand what libraries and frameworks are key in order for us to build this and get a head start, so we're not reinventing the wheel here. So essentially we have the name set up over here, DeFi tutorial, DeFi token staking app with description. You put the offer here, and then we have our dependencies. So we see that we are using Web3. Okay, so we see we have our web3.js, and that's basically what we're going to be using in order to interact with our MetaMask, to interact with our Ethereum nodes so that we can run these transactions, as we're going to see. We're using some TypeScript for one of the libraries that we have. So we have our TypeScript installed. We see that we have Truffle, which we use, of course, for all of our blockchain implementations, for deploying our contracts, our migrations, for tests as well. We have Solidity here. We have the latest version of Solidity. Then for our front end, just to be, just to have a little bit of UI, make it a little bit fun, we have our particles set up over here so that we can leverage this library to build a nice little, build some modern animation in the background. We have our React scripts so we can run. And then for a little bit of design additions, we have Bootstrap set up as well. And then we have Chai for our testing, which we're going to see when we're going to be building out our testing to make sure that everything is up and running with our contracts correctly. Okay, and if we just browse down, we see our scripts here. So we can run start, npm run start to test our development servers. All right, and then finally what we want to do is go back to our terminal, and we want to install our dependencies, install our npm dependencies. And in order to do that, it's as simple as typing in npm install or npm I and hitting enter. And it's now, and when we do this, npm is going to run through all the dependencies. As we can see, it's running through all the dependencies. It's running through all these, and it's installing everything we need into a very large file of texts. so that we can leverage these libraries and use them, and it's not just a script that doesn't actually fetch anything. Okay, and so once you have installed everything, you're going to see that we have Truffle installed here. We have Solidity. We have our Solidity. We see everything with some, and it says that we've installed 2635 packages from 1093 contributors. Wow. And 56 of these packages are looking for funding. So if you want to help out some of these great libraries that exist, you can always type in npm fund and learn more about how you can help these coders out there that are trying to making our lives easier. Okay, great job setting up your dependencies, getting this project, getting it going. Now that we have our project set up, we've gone over some basic architecture, we can actually get into building what it takes to set up our smart contracts. Great work, and I'll see you in the next video.